What comes to mind when Frida Kahlo's name is said is a famous self-portrait painter, a role model for many female artists. Frida has broken through many barriers in her time period, being a Mexican bisexual female artist, along with breaking through her health issues and cultural norms.
Frida Kahlo was born on July 6, 1907 in Coyoacán, Mexico City, Mexico. She grew up in her family house, which later on was named the Blue House or Casa Azul. Contracting polio at the age of 6 caused many malfunctions on her body. Polio had caused her right leg to become thinner than her left leg. She wore long skirts to cover up her legs for most of her life. While recovering from polio, her father encouraged her to participate in sports, which led her to play soccer, swimming, and wrestle, breaking barriers from a young age, not letting polio stop her from participating in sports. Heading towards her teenage years, she joined a national preparatory school. She was one out of 35 females to enter the school. Once in school, she joined the Catchets, a group of pranksters led by Alejandro Gomez. They shared similar political views about the world. She eventually fell in love with Alejandro Gomez Arias. Despite wanting to become a doctor, she eventually left after a fatal incident to pursue her dream as an artist. Rather than staying on a stable path, she broke away and chose an unstable path.
On September 17, 1925, Frida was traveling on a bus with Gomez, resulting in a collision between another vehicle. This left her with some serious injuries, the most dire ones being a fractured pelvis and spinal column. An iron handrail hit her lower abdomen. She stayed at the Red Cross Hospital in Mexico City for several months. During her recovery, she painted her first self-portrait in a velvet dress, using a traditional Mexican art style that was inspired by the European Renaissance. Frida Kahlo once said, "I paint myself because I'm often alone, and I am the subject I know best."
Due to the accident and the injury she sustained, she is unable to bear a child. This inspired her painting Henry Ford Hospital. She is laying in a hospital bed, naked, hemorrhaging after a miscarriage, with a stillborn fetus, a flower, a pelvis, and a snout connected by her veins. The emotional pain is supported by the visible tear running down her face and the amount of blood. Kahlo began to compose more artwork surrounding infertility, along with breaking away from Mexican art styles to more realistic and surrealistic components.
From living a life of pain to having dilemmas with her health, she ultimately believed her life was worthless. Failing her role as a woman in the eyes of Mexican society, she utilized all of these emotions in her paintings, leading to My Birth, representing the painful memories of her miscarriages. There, she illustrates her birth being an unwelcoming event where no loved ones are present. Marriage suffered as Diego had multiple affairs. Frida ignored this, believing it would be short-lived, until Rivera included Kahlo's sister, Cristina. Discovering this act of betrayal, Frida was devastated and ceased painting for months. Once she commenced, Memory was created, portraying devastation and defeat, with the wound in her chest as her heart lies on the ground. Hayden Herrera notes, the greater the pain she wishes to convey, the bloodier her self-portraits became. Previous work shows with her with colorful clothing. Now, she wore a dark suit with a pair of scissors in her right hand, cutting off her long black hair. Despite issues in her marriage, she found a way to break the barrier of these publications through artwork.
Later, in 1941, she was granted a commission from the Mexican government for 5 portraits of important Mexican women, but she was unable to finish this project due to her losing her father that same year and proceeding to suffer from health problems. Although she had personal challenges, she broke barriers by continuing to grow in popularity and being included in multiple group exhibits. Her condition worsened in 1950, the same year she was diagnosed with gangrene in the right foot, which was later amputated. Then, in 1953, the only Mexican solo exhibit just a year before her death at the age of 47. Although she had limited mobility, at the time she didn't let that barrier stop her from showing up. Instead, she broke the barrier by showing up to the exhibit opening ceremony in an ambulance. Although during her life she didn't sell many portraits, today her artwork is sold at a very high price. For example, Roots is sold at $5.62 million at the Sotheby's auction in New York. As for the emotional pain in her artwork, wasn't left unnoticed. In the healthcare community, for example, A New York psychologist uses Kahlo artwork in therapy sessions to help women talk about their experiences of emotional and physical trauma, such as infidelity, violence, and infertility.
Around the time of her divorce from Diego in 1939, Frida met Josephine Baker. Frida traveled to Paris for an exhibition of her work. Although there wasn't any written documentation of any correspondence between the two, in the movie Frida, they met in a nightclub where Josephine performed. People aren't quite sure whether or not their affair was short or long-lived. Around this time, bisexuality wasn't socially accepted. Due to this, she broke barriers when it came to sexuality. Baker was one of the few known to have female lovers. Along with bisexuality, Frida began to wear suits as a form of independence, which isn't common for females. Due to these subcultural values, Frida broke barriers from her cultural norms.
Frida Kahlo has inspired many female artists through not only her art, but also her ability to overcome obstacles. Instead of allowing these barriers to block her path, she broke through and created amazing artwork that allowed her audience to understand her emotions, all while being vulnerable.
Aranza Rodriguez, a painter, performance artist, and sculptor, describes Frida. Frida is an inspiration because as a woman and an artist, she broke a lot of barriers. Not only does she defy beauty standards, she taught us resilience when she did not stop after the terrible bus accident. Instead of her trauma and pain being a barrier, she used it to drive her self-exploration and art. She was openly bisexual at a time where this was very controversial, and a member of the Communist Party. In the recent survey of Mexican women, one of the questions was which woman you consider an inspiration, and 70% of the women wrote Frida.
Janine Ribad, a young painter, stands above Frida is, I used to be such a hater. I didn't like Frida at all. I thought she was overrated and was only famous because of her husband. A couple years ago, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, and it got increasingly difficult for me to paint, so I got a bit depressed for a while. But I decided to adapt and draw more on my iPad Pro from bed. When drawing from bed, I thought of Frida. She motivated me to keep going because she broke barriers of not allowing it to stop her from her craft. I started to feel a wave of affection towards Frida. Now I have no doubt she deserves her place in history.
Frida Kahlo has broken through many barriers from an early age until the end. She is an inspiration for many female artists and is a female role model. She broke through the barrier of female artists, health issues, and cultural norms.